So it's such a big privilege and honor to be invited to attend this lecture today, and I would like to respectfully greet the honorable guests that are right in front, the VIPs, then also you as attendant. And it will really be like a very informal presentation because I think my predecessors already set the tone very strongly about the reality about HIV/AIDS, but I just want to emphasize on the fact that HIV/AIDS is a global public health issue. It's not just an African or an Asian or Latin American issue. It is a global public health issue. And in Eastern and Southern Africa, almost 50% of new infections in the world occur in these regions. So Eastern and Southern Africa may deserve a specific attention. But where I'm come from, Benin, which is in West and Central Africa, the HIV prevalence is quite low, around 1.5%, but you can see some disparity across country. 0.2% in Mauritania, 1.2% in Benin, where I'm from, which is kind of low, or up to 7.4% in Equatorial Guinea. As it has been said before, women are highly affected by HIV/AIDS. Adolescent girls are as well as twice as likely to acquire HIV compared to boys. However, we should not just focus on those alarming statistics. There are progress that we need to acknowledge, that we need to celebrate, both in Africa and outside. The proportion of people who are under treatment increased. The rate of new infection among children decrease, and you can also see that there is a decline of infection among adults. So yes, there is an issue that we need to focus on, but there's also some progress that we need to build upon. So my country, Benin Republic, is located in West Africa. It's a French-speaking country. We have 1.2% of prevalence in the general population, but in key population, which are sex workers or sexual minorities, or LGBTQ+, the prevalence can be as high as 7 to 15%. But the good thing that I would like to highlight about Benin is, first, there was a strong political leadership in addressing HIV/AIDS. That is why the National AIDS Council is spearheaded by the president itself. The second, Benin was one of the first 3 countries to vote a law to stop discrimination and stigma about or on HIV/AIDS positive people. So I think having this legal framework in place kind of really help activists and advocates like myself to come up front and say we need to address and discuss about HIV/AIDS openly, and we need to make sure that we do not stigmatize anyone. Now, in the introduction, I've been introduced as the founder of the Young Beninese Leader Association, which is a platform of young professional advocate, activists, physician, researcher, lawyer, which came together in 2010 to mobilize 300 people because we thought we wanted to march in the streets and call upon policymakers and governments about the need to invest in healthcare, in reproductive health, but more specifically in HIV/AIDS. So this first event was our Red Ribbon campaign that we call La Campagne du Ruban Rouge. And the slogan, as you can see here, sans capote, on est juste des potes. Without a condom, we just befriend nothing else. And in French, it kind of rhymed very well, sans capote, on est juste des potes. So for us, it was 20 years old, 21 years old, young people coming together, rallying 300 people in the street, and just marching for an hour and drawing attention on the fact that we don't have to wait for policymakers, but as a young person, as student, researcher, or advocate, we can call upon and identify issues in our communities. This campaign was so successful that it moved from the march, the Red Ribbon March, to the Red Ribbon campaign. So a couple of young people came up with ideas such as Run Faster Than AIDS initiative. So they organized a tournament where they have to run against each other, and the first person will receive some gift. But the idea behind it is we need to run faster than HIV, we need to have information quicker and faster, and we need to have less at-risk behavior so that we can be on top of the game and ahead of HIV/AIDS. I didn't expect that. So young girls are disproportionately affected, as we said. So something we also realize we can use is what can interest young girls and young boys. We thought about soccer because we had a lot of young girls interested in soccer in Benin. So we partnered with a couple of local and international organizations and used soccer as a strategy to bring them together and discuss about safe sex, abstinence, and less risky behavior. A couple of them came up with an idea of bringing sex worker on a radio show and discuss about HIV prevention. A couple of us identified journalists and talk about the law against stigmatization and discrimination. So a lot of ideas just came up from one or two individuals sitting together and deciding to make a change. And you can make a change even if you're alone, even if you're two, it is enough to make a change in your community. And then we got noticed by the Ministry of Health, by the presidents, and all of those organizations who now wanted to work with us and were willing to give us some funding to scale up our initiative. What did we learn through 10 years of advocacy, working both on HIV, sexual reproductive health, and gender equality? Specifically on HIV, we learned that girls, adolescents, and youth, including key populations, must be at the center of the HIV/AIDS response, and the minister clearly highlighted that during his speech. We also clearly realized that we cannot aim at reducing HIV/AIDS or any other harmful practices if we don't address the root causes of gender inequalities, which means we need to look at gender-based violence. We need to keep girls in school. We need to provide economic opportunity so that girls and women can be independent. We also learned that stigma and discrimination are the most opportunistic diseases. For us, it was so clear that someone who was stigmatized and discriminated will not probably inform his or her partner about his or her status, and will probably have many more people get infected. Now, most importantly, funding. We need to put our money where our priorities are. And this message, I'm sending it to the policymakers that we have here. We need to put our money where our mouth is, so the lack of sustainable both domestic funding by countries themselves and international funding definitely jeopardize and threaten the achievement and the gains that we had so far in the HIV response. And making sure, most importantly, that we have the communities, we have people in the community as allies. You know, it can be anyone, it can be a teacher, it can be a social worker, to bring them on board. I think it's the key for success. So, what can we specifically recommend to anyone here tonight, whether it's a student or a policymaker or a leader? What can we recommend? We think that one key message and important is to make sure that everyone has access to comprehensive sexuality education. Whether you are from this region, this country, you need to have access to comprehensive sexuality education, knowing your rights, and making sure that you make appropriate choices for your body. Gender-friendly policies, we've already talked about that. Having adolescents, youth, and women, they are not the future. You are the present. You are not the future. You are the present. And policymaker needs to understand that adolescents and young people are not just the future, but are the present. Key population and social minorities definitely need to be part and shape all policies and shape all programs, because they know what the real needs are. I've already talked about the stigma piece. I've talked about the legal barrier, which in some countries, someone who is HIV positive may be criminalized or may be discriminated against, and this can affect the person's ability to even inform his or her partner. I will let all those boring stuff go away, and I will focus on one point. How can we make sure that we integrate sexual reproductive health and right and HIV/AIDS. There is a phenomenal opportunity that is untapped in some country where we can take advantage, for example, of having an adolescent girl coming for her HPV vaccination and take that opportunity and do a counseling or a screening on HIV with her consent. We can take an opportunity to use a consultation on family planning for a woman to do a screening on HIV or even to do a cancer screening on HPV. So all of these require to integrate reproductive health and HIV as a continuum and not as two separate blocks. Now, let's move away from the boring stuff and let's see this video. This video is actually just a short way for me to display a little bit about my work, about who am I, in very few words, and I will come back right after this video. Because I want to be respectful of the time, I will not finish the video, but you can find it on YouTube, Yours in Power. In conclusion, I just want to highlight 3 elements. We need to have a feminist and gender-based approach in addressing HIV/AIDS. Human rights needs to be at the core of our intervention, and we need to make sure we leave no one behind. Thank you so much for listening to me.